Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move. This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode. This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
Hey guys, thanks for coming back. And just like always, if you see something in this episode that resonates with you or that you feel like you need to share out to somebody, don't be selfish with the information. We ask that you go ahead and share that out. Over the past 12 to 18 months, the Marine Corps has had some divisive remarks penned about it concerning the adaptation of the force. Retired generals and warfighters have been expressing concern over the new force design. There are several articles bashing the new design and others that just show passive-aggressive concern. I was interested in understanding the why behind some of these changes, so I began to investigate the topic. I found a few articles from one of the most senior gunners currently serving in the Marine Corps. Gunner LaRose served as one of the representatives from the Marine Corps for the Pentagon's Close Combat Lethality Task Force. While reading his works, I was impressed by the way he painted new technologies. I was going to do an episode on the information that I found, but Gunner LaRose can do a much better job of that than I can. This episode is my aim at bridging the two sides of the coin. After protecting the nation for 30 years and making his way close to all the way up to being a gunner, LaRose has continued to serve. Sir, I thank you for your time and efforts along the way, and I spent my life in service and, consequently, as it turns out of service, trying to emulate men like Stephen LaRose. Sir, thanks for coming out. I appreciate you taking the time, and we're honored to have you on the show.
Hey, thank you, brother. I'm honored and privileged to be here with you.
Well, it is mutual. The feeling is mutual for sure. I think we'll talk. We talked offline about kind of where we're going to go, but before we get there, I want to know, kind of how we got here. So I kind of want to know family culture growing up. Where you come from. Parents in the home, siblings, sports, religion, and we'll kind of stem off of that, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Ryan. I've watched some of your podcasts in the past. I've been able to travel a little bit, so obviously listen to them as well. But, I've been able to take a look at your background too and understand you had a good, strong background in sports that you're passing on to your family, to your children, especially with softball and baseball. So I'm going to use that as kind of the springboard into my upbringing, which was the same way. Sports teach kids things in life. It's not only just winning and losing, but teamwork and a lot of other associated, social needs to be a productive adult. I come from a very similar background when it comes to sports, and right now I have those children doing the same thing. But to go even further back, some of my heroes, some of the things that really drove me was, I'll first shoot at my mother. She was the first person that I can remember that really showed me what true courage was and commitment to her children when she left my father, and she went on her own knowing that she needed to pick a better path. And that was the right thing to do. See somebody commit to the right thing and see somebody have to fight through adversity. I saw that at a young age. And I saw that with my mother. She was committed to doing the right thing. She was committed to take care of her children. So she decided to do it on her own in a period of time when, that was being a single mom was tough. So I want to say right there, watching my mother go through the struggles really began to codify what I thought was most important in life, taking on those challenges. Now, of course, a big transition in my life, she went on and met the man, her soulmate, and married a Marine. And he was a Korean War veteran, and he was a Sergeant Hales, joined in 1947, was a casualty, returned home in 1951 during the Korean conflict. And that man is the man that raised me. So, from a very young age. So you could, when we talk about call to service, I think it starts right here with the injection of a man with a foundation in the Marine Corps.
For sure.
So, amphibious background. He was a Marine by trade, and then became a professional fisherman. So I grew up on the water, and And so early mornings and late nights weren't anything new. Spending all that time on the water, understanding the ways of the water, weather, nautical navigation, and those things. And so the man that raised me, my dad, he being a former Marine, I remember as a child, we went to collect up some customers, some clients that we were taking out on a fishing trip, and it was 5 a.m. We made it to the diner to meet the clients, and all of a sudden there became news, big news announcements, and it was everywhere. The TV changed, it was the Beirut bombing, and my dad was a tough man. He was tough. I mean, he lived the Marine Corps mantra outside the Marine Corps as much as he did when he was in the Marine Corps. And when he saw these news releases, these flash news reports coming out of Beirut, Lebanon, we looked at the folks in the diner, and he immediately canceled the trip and said, "Can't go out. We have to, too much. I got to figure out what's going on." And he gave a much better explanation. I'm paraphrasing big time. He gave a better explanation. But we jumped back in the truck and went home. And on the way home, he had the radio up. He's listening to the news reports coming out of Beirut, Lebanon. And this is the first time I ever saw my dad cry. And he only cried twice in my lifetime. And this was one of them. And so I watched this man listening to these news reports rush home. He didn't leave the home for 2 days until he knew exactly what had happened to the Marines in Beirut, Lebanon. And as I watched him, this is where the hook was set, to be honest with you, why I became a Marine. After, a man that got discharged from the Marine Corps in the mid-1950s due to wounds in combat. And he was still so connected to those brothers on the battlefield that tears came to his eyes. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I gotta be a part of that. I gotta be. I don't know what that is. Where does that come from, and what is it? Because I want to be part of a brotherhood, part of a family that I wouldn't even be a part of it, but all the way I'd be able to affect me like that. So I think the call to service, as we talked about, that it began right there. I knew right then I was going to become a United States Marine. I just didn't know when and in what capacity. Our athletic background. I was on spring break after 3 years of college and joined with a buddy. We joined the buddy program, and of course, he was the furthest thing from an athlete. He was going to college as a automotive technician, and he was getting his degree in automotive technician. And him and I got drunk on spring break and joined the Marine Corps after watching Full Metal Jacket. So, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Of course, parents out, and it can go from there. But that was kind of my call to service right there, and that's how it all began.
Yeah, that's wild. I'm well after you generationally, coming in, and most of the guys, when I interview them, it's 9/11 is generally the call to service. And then, so I've interviewed some people older than me now, and different wars than me even, and their calls to service they seem to always have some sort of imprint, though. Like, it might not have been 9/11, but somebody imprinted on them in some kind of deep way. And in this case, that's an amazing story. And, it kind of reminds me of a lot of the way, we don't have to go too far into it, but when the Marines got killed at HKIA in the corpsman, like, I felt like I hurt, and it was weird. I didn't know any of them. And that was the first time since I'd been out that we had taken, a blow like that. And it like just, I felt it blow the wind out of me, just like, and you can't, it doesn't stop seemingly. So,
I felt like my dad on the day that those Marines were killed at HKIA. I cried. I openly cried. I didn't leave the house. But it was also an exclamation point on all our sacrifices. Ryan pushing to Marja, and the fight in Marja. We dropped you. We dropped you in the center of the city and said, "Hold up, we'll get to you when we get to you." In a fine Marine fashion, it said, "Perfect, we're surrounded. Now we can shoot in all directions."
That's right. That's true.
And as your platoon commanders back then, Lieutenant Franco and Lieutenant Manuel really did embraced Major Manuel embraced
amazing
the warfighter mantra. My God, you guys had some young warfighters with you. It all goes back to how you felt at HKI as well, and the way I felt we know what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what my father felt. I know why Marines past and present feel the way we feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't like, it doesn't, to me, it didn't hit me. I knew I had feelings about guys I lost and experiences I had. And that makes sense to me. I just never felt it for guys I didn't know like that before. And then when it happened, it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's, it's your brothers. You don't have to know them, but it's your people.
Yep. They come from our tribe. That's us. And, I think the American people, sometimes I feel like when Saving Private Ryan was released, I think when they landed at the beach and the war fighting that was occurring, I don't think the American public necessarily needs to see that. You and I as war fighters, the things we sing, the things we've done, the biggest enemy to war fighting is a camera. However, I think at HKIA, when the HBO special showed the brutality of trying to keep security, there has to be tough men and women that have to do tough things.
Mm-hmm. That's a fact. I was always a kind of the same view that cameras are bad. But I don't know about that. I feel like the whole reason I did this podcast is because I feel like we maybe even have junior and freshman congressmen and women that don't even think war's real. They're so insulated from it. Like the United States, and it's kind of like a beautiful thing. They are so free that they don't even understand the blanket of freedom that they have. They don't even understand where it comes from because they don't have to. And it's like, yeah, that's good. But once you get to a point where your civilian run Congress is voting on your budget and they keep slashing it over and over and over, it can only be one thing. It can only be because they just don't think that's real. Because if they thought that was real, that is the number one thing that you don't cut.
Yep.
And so that was kind of my thrust to come on here is like, if I show enough of these dudes that have been there and enough of these guys that have made it through the ladder and to the top and let them tell their stories, then at least the listening audience, however big that may get, they will know that it's real. And maybe that'll go somewhere.
You know what I got out of it, Ryan? One of the most important things, even as we march into Force Design 2030 and we move forward, is that, the agreement between the American people and the United States Marine Corps, always ready, prepared to do what America asks of us.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our predecessors, as you meant, the debate goes on about whether or not the Marine Corps is going to be that fight tonight force, whether it can really win in the future. At the end of the day, if we create the right person, and that's when we'll get into training and human performance and the individual.
Mm-hmm.
If you create the right person, you create them with the right mindset, I don't care where you send them, they're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just up to us to take care of that. So I think the HKIA HBO special was very important to a lot of our predecessors. I think the Marine Corps is getting weak, that the Marine Corps we're not producing Marines. I'd say, when you need to flip that switch, to this day, I can take a young man or woman, make them a United States Marine. Why flip that switch? They can become savages on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And they will do things for the love of each other and for the love, the service, for the love of God, and for the love of the country. They will do brutal things, and it's very important that we take care of them when they get back.
Very important. Very important. All right, well, let's kick into your service then. So, year-wise, when do you come in?
You
said spring break of your third year?
Yeah, 1993, I joined the Marine Corps.
Okay.
Post, Gulf War, first Gulf War. So I joined in 1993. So, I say that out loud, and it doesn't seem that long ago for me, but it certainly, echoes that I've been in coming up on my 30th year.
A hot minute. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so were you East Coast or West?
I'm an SOI East grad.
Okay.
So I'm East Coast, and I'll talk a little, it's kind of funny, when I was the SOI West Regimental Gunner, it was the first time I'd ever been stationed on the East Coast, and I don't want to jump around my career too much, but I went to a 1st Marine Division meeting at the time. Gunner Vince Kaiser was the division gunner, and all of his battalion gunners were sitting in there, and everyone that's on the West Coast to try to align all efforts, unity of effort. And came to me and he's like, well, we don't expect you to be able to add much, Steve. You're an East Coaster.
It's always like that. It always comes down to it. You didn't hike the hills, whatever. I don't know. I didn't hike the hills, and I probably wouldn't have liked it. But no. I land nabbed in in Jacksonville, so that's not fun.
Those conversation, Ryan, I'm out there and you have the Marines marching up the Alpha Shelf. And the first time I went up the Alpha Shelf and I called Camp Lejeune, I said, I think I can see you from here. But as much as they have the hills, they're terrified of a January, February at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Excited. It's 36 degrees.
It sucks.
And it's just horrible, right? So, we both have shared hardships just in different ways.
That's right.
Up the shelf and stuff's painful. But on that same note, they certainly don't want to spend a January, February at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
That's right. I love it. I love the little intramural squabbles. It kind of like if you have nothing else to hate on, you can just hate on each other and keep yourselves warm through whatever it is you're going through.
It is, and it keeps us all warm when it's really freezing. It keeps you out of boredom when you have nothing better to do, when you're all sitting there for a ride, right?
That's right.
So it's all good stuff. So 1993, I joined the Marine Corps, and I was and to go through the service very rapidly. I was meritoriously promoted out of recruit training. I was meritoriously promoted out of SOI, and I say that to set the conditions that the minute I got to the fleet, I was then thrown in jail. Because I was truly indoctrinated in the United States Marine Corps, and we were out at a bar after a CAX Combined Arms exercise in the summer of '94. And, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina offers challenges just like the West Coast. And there were a lot of biker gangs down there and good folks, but also some bad folks. And so there was a Marine getting beat just furiously in an alleyway. And so we saw it. We all looked at each other and said, well, to leave no brother behind.
Can't have that.
So we marched, into the alleyway to get him. We didn't want to let him go. And so that turned into, and it bled into the bar and so as I was being read my rights after the police showed up, we were 60 days was what I was sentenced in Onslow County Jail for assault and battery and
oh my God,
everything. But I got back to the Marine Corps, and this is what's great about the Marine Corps. At first, the first sergeant's like, I had to go to the first sergeant to request leave to go to jail, and and you can only imagine how that conversation went, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And, you got to request leave to go to jail. And he's like, if you're not here Monday, we're just going to charge you UA. So you're going to get not only going to jail in town, but the minute you get released from where, he's going to throw you in the brig. And so I got out of jail in town, and it was a Saturday morning, real early. And I go on base. It's Saturday, and I'm just waiting for PMO. Like, yeah, I'm going. And they're like, no, well, probably Monday morning. Then Monday morning formation, PMO. Monday morning formation comes. They're like, LaRose reports the battalion officers, and that's it, right? I'm thinking,
here we go.
Transfer over to the brig, and go up, and the company commander drags me up to the battalion commander's office, go front and center, and he just looks at me. He goes, we know what you did and why you did it. I'll get out of my office, and I simply got a page 11 for failure to follow a liberty order. Because what we did was what we were taught to do: leave no Marine behind. Never leave a Marine behind. And the battalion commander understood that, and he knew why. And so once we got back, it was kind of honored in some respects. Within the ranks, when you're in the trenches and you've got guys that are going to fight for you, that means something. And even the battalion commander, who's then Lieutenant Colonel DJ Halick, who then went on to become the Lion of Najaf, as your book in Iraq would indicate from Lions of Marja. He was a true warfighter, went on to become the first CG of MARSOC. So he truly understood why. And so I was blessed. I was blessed to be surrounded by warfighters at the time when I stumbled and may have made a bad decision. I think it was the right decision. But I didn't take the pack off. And the reason why I want to bring that up is at no time with the meritorious promotions, I get in trouble, right? You had that little hitch in the road. You don't take your pack off. I kept my pack on, won multiple meritorious promotion boards. After that, couldn't get promoted because I was on a non-promotional list. Be added in there, wins meritorious promotion, but can't be promoted due to, still non-promotable for 12 months. But the point is that you never take your pack off. You stay focused.
Drive on.
Yep. And then after that first enlistment, we used to have a good tradition in the Marine Corps that your first enlistment, you could make a few mistakes, learn from it. As long as you learn and you repeat offender of folks who don't learn. I don't have time. No one has time for folks who just don't learn your lesson. So we learned the lesson. First 4-year evaluation, was allowed to re-enlist and never looked back. Never got in trouble again. But I think that really kind of set the conditions of who I was and what that meant to stand to your moral ground, the things the Marine Corps taught us. You know, I had a formation with a regimental sergeant major. It was all Marines that had been in trouble. I looked at the regimental sergeant major. He goes, "Dang it, they're dragging us down. This is the 10%. It takes up 90% of my time." And I said, "Sergeant Major, have you ever been in trouble? Have you ever been thrown in jail or been in trouble?" He's like, "Heck no. I'm a picture perfect Marine." I said, "Well, then just sit here and wait. Maybe I should talk."
Yeah, what do you have to say about that?
He didn't know what to say, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But again, one of the things you as an NCO, when you're in the trenches, one, you got to relate, you got to be trusted.
Yep, that's a fact.
Right.
Especially if you're going down range.
Yep. And so I think those traits were brought out early. That was the foundation for me continuing on and going on. You know, I was an instructor at Scout Sniper School. I represented the Marine Corps 2 years at the International Sniper Competition in Fredericton, Canada. Went on to be the honor grad of Advanced Scout Sniper School, Ranger Airborne School, the honor grad of Airborne School.
How was that? How was the Army school?
You know what? Again, parochial. It was fun and bad, and because they want to mess with Marines just as much as we want to go back and forth. So
and you're outnumbered, I would assume, since it's their school, right? Like drastically.
Yeah. We were doing our swimming in first phase, in the Ranger assessment phase, and having to do your swim quals. And this young soldier, who they were all terrified because they don't spend much time in the pool. We at least in training and stuff, we got to go live in a pool for a little while. So we're at least associated to it and comfortable to a point. Well, they threw this kid out and he's puking and he's covered, and the Ranger instructors are screaming at him. And I start laughing, but I'm 6'6". So when I started laughing, I couldn't hide. They were like, "Oh my God, Jarhead's laughing, get him in here." So my swim qual took 2.5 hours, which would have only took 20 minutes if I just wouldn't have laughed.
You just held that bearing.
Yeah. Lost it 2.5 hours in the pool later, and I'm like, "Okay, you guys win. That was tough."
Yep, I'm done. I won't laugh no more.
That was it. So, a great experience. I love my Army brothers. I think it's one of the reasons why I spent so much time on the Close Combat Lethality Task Force. And when we get there, I have a lot of respect for our warfighting brothers. And we talk about our experiences in combat, and Ramadi in Iraq. We had the 1-3 DCT in the 1st and the 9th on the opposite side of Ramadi, and then they got the call. They were told they were going to extend their tour to 18 months. Okay, so you're in hell on earth, and you think 12 months was too long, and then you get the phone call that you're now going to extend it 8 to 18 months.
I don't know how they do it.
Worst place on earth. So when I went out to the 1st and 9th, we do border crossings to make sure you skew those lines for the enemy. And I was with a group of the 1st and 9th, probably about their 14th or 15th month into their combat tour in hell on earth. And they were like ghosts, right? I mean, they were beat down, and they were, and you want to talk about a 1,000-yard stare, that look of, I've checked out, meaning mentally, when they say it doesn't matter anymore, the look on their face is, I get shot right now and it just doesn't matter.
Make my day.
Yep.
Yeah.
So those strong brothers that we've had to serve with shoulder to shoulder in the Army, I can't say enough. So there's a lot of Ranger experiences, a lot of, Gunny Oaks, 2001 Marine, won the best Ranger competition with his partner, and his famous quote was, Rangers are just like Marines. They just walked in the wrong door when they were recruited.
Nice. That's awesome. Now, at what point did you decide you wanted to be a gunner?
Being a small unit guy for as long as I was, I began to fear at the rank of gunnery sergeant what was going to happen to me. Because even as a gunny, I was still in charge of small infantry units. Mm-hmm. So at the rank of gunnery sergeant, I started to get concerned. And then I met my first gunner, Gunner Cargyle, in combat, Cannon Cargyle. Met him in combat for RCT6, and everyone's like, "Hey, I wanted to do some pre-op mission prep, so we wanted some live fire training." Sure. He's like, "You go ask the gunner for that." And I'm like, "Who in the hell is going to approve my ammo? Who do I need to convince? Gunnery sergeant who's been doing this for a while." And then I had to go to his office, march in there with my plan, and explain to him my plan, so I wasn't wasting valuable ammunition. And I was like, when I left there, I was wowed. I'm like, okay, I don't know who that guy was, but I want to be that,
Mm-hmm.
And so I put my package in, and while I was deployed in combat in Iraq, I was selected. But that was it. I met my first gunner. real, that I understood the interaction. I'd seen one as a private, a PFC, was
Sure.
walking the lines. He had a corncob pipe and red suspenders, and I'm like, why is the staff sergeant not beating him to death? Because he has no blouse, he's in red suspenders and smoking a corncob pipe, and I had no clue who he was. And of course, as a Lance Corporal, my interaction was very limited, except for I said, "Hey, Gunner." And before I could get "Hey, Gunner" out of my mouth, I had a finger in my eye, and it was the gunnery sergeant. And they're like, "That's a sir to you scumbag." And so I can't really say I knew exactly what the heck he was, because I didn't get that opportunity. But my interaction with Gunner Cargyle, and then later Gunner Nick Vitale, I mean, hooked. Because now that
He
was,
got me.
that's, you want to stay in the infantry, you want to stay war fighting. First sergeant, master sergeant, sergeant major, or master guns. You get so many more MOSs when you become a master sergeant. You have to learn and grow to fight under canvas and command and control battalions. First sergeants and sergeant majors need to grow administratively. They have to be able to manage manpower and really have the managerial skills to do that. And then, of course, I saw the gunner, and he was on every live fire range. He was worried about ammo. He was worried about tactics. He was worried about small unit deployment. He was worried about combined arms. He was concerned about weaponeering. And I'm like, well, there it is.
Yeah, it's the top. That's definitely what being a gunner would have been my path that I would have tried to go to. I think it allows you to grow in the Marine Corps and grow older, but still stay right with the guys and involved in the tactics and the movement. Because after sergeant, you go to staff sergeant, depending on if you're in the regular line, you're moving away after you take a squad, and the new force design will be different, but you start to move away a bit from the troops. And that's what I hated about, after that, you're moving away. If you go back to the gunner route or the master sergeant route, you're coming back and at least having an impact or, an influence on what's going on with the war fighting. So it's amazing. I know, I don't know, but I had several talks with Gunner Vitale in like the 2011-12 time frame, and he was the most belligerent person I ever met in my life. But it was the first real big contact I had with a gunner, and it was like, yeah, I want to be that. I don't know what he's got, how he's got this leverage or this power, but that's the spot.
Yeah, Gunner Vitale was an angry man, right? I mean, he was angry. And,
Very.
Gunners have a very rich tradition of being angry. So sometimes because we're so passionate, we are true believers, right? And true believers in war fighters. And so Gunner Vitale was a perfect example of, one of the most brilliant gunners when it came to weaponeering. He understood the employment of weapons. He wrote he wrote a manifesto leading the Marine Corps on fire team leaders and how it all ties together. And that manifesto is unbelievable. And I'll pass it on to you, Ryan, just to see, because you mentioned Gunner Vitale, the brilliance of this man.
I'd love to read it.
Yeah. And now the point being is that here we are after he's retired for God knows how long, and he did that manifesto. It means more today, what he wrote, than it did then. That's when you know you have true brilliance, because they're looking toward, bleeding edge.
Transcends time.
Yeah. Why is he so committed to this small unit? Why is he so committed to being able to articulate how this all ties together at the smallest unit level for war fighting? And brilliant gentleman. I learned every time I came across him.
Yeah, he would give talks. He gave a couple talks when I was in combat instructor course, and about being pinned down, about I guess there was a lot of things coming back from Marja Treknal with Sangin. And I was there when some of it happened. We had you had one guy digging a IED in a hole, and somebody, some commander somewhere, one of them, calls a Harrier in on him. And I remember Colonel Christmas blowing up in the COC about why did we just drop a bomb on one guy, and going through this whole method. And then when we come back, I'm sitting in McKick, and he's giving an ass chewing or a lecture, however you wanted to look at it, about using too big of munitions on not the right targets, how we should be closing on these guys or sending a squad out to interdict that, or a sniper team, and not calling a Harrier. And at first in the beginning of the conversation, I was like, whatever. And then by the end of it, I'm listening to him, I'm like, no, this makes sense. This is I seen this with my own eyes. he's just as angry as the colonel was that day, when somebody let one loose. So, yeah, that makes sense. He had an impact on me. I'm sure he had an impact on a lot of people. He was a real one. That's for sure.
And in my career path, I ended up winning this Holbrook Trophy over my shoulder, and I'm honored to have that. The reason why is because it was while I was serving with the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, in the final combat deployment, before we rolled up the guidon and put that away. So being part of The Walking Dead, being a dead walker, that's huge to me. Being a part of that team was huge to me. Colonel Corey Collier, and that whole group was unbelievable, and a lot of memories, a lot of gray hair and a bald spot and a receding hairline at that deployment. But I can't say enough, and it really symbolizes to me, as we were closing out, it was the first time I heard this, Ryan, and as you did the push into Marja, 1st Battalion, 9th Marines was the last infantry. 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines followed us up, but everyone knew it was all about withdrawal, and being on the battlefield. And for the first time ever, I heard Marines, going condition 1, leaving the wire, and they'd echo, damn it, I don't want to be the last Marine killed in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we were at this point in the conflict because the fighting still was so bad. People were like, oh, we're withdrawing, we won the battlefield. We didn't win. Down in Helmand Province, I don't, the level of fighting that was still going on as we were withdrawing, I think would shock the American people. And so Marines were leaving the wire knowing they were going to get in a fight every day, a serious fight. And now the mentality, because we're leaving and they know we're leaving, I don't want to be the last Marine killed in Afghanistan. Was the beginning of that mentality, as we watched the tea leaves, point in our direction out of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting mindset, but yeah, definitely in Afghanistan. I know towards the end of every deployment, every combat deployment, that I did, guys would get, giddy the last 30 days, or, sometimes it would go all the way to 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks. And then everybody wanted to, not everybody, but you had a good portion of guys we shouldn't go all the way out to that checkpoint. And it's like, no, we still have to go all the way out to that checkpoint. We still have to do our job for the last 2 weeks, but there is that mindset of, man, we're way too close. Because you don't want to get clipped at the end of it. Then you went through all of that shit and you still got clipped. If you want to get clipped right in the beginning, if you're going, that's kind of what we established.
Yeah, and right now this will kind of stem into as we get into force design. My current boss, General Kyle Ellison, out of the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, he's tasked for IBX 2.0, which is the next infantry battalion experimentation. Second one, we really got to get an 80% solution. We really have to nail this one down that it's an operationally functional concept to pass on to the op forward, or at least to the commandant for solid decisions where he is confident that an 80% solution has been found. But he was the battalion commander for 2-6. He worked with you guys, followed you up, and I was the gunner that came in just after him, because I was your gunner for a short period of time before I had a near-death accident that took me out of it. And then I returned back to the 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines. But on the last week of the RIP, he lost a Marine Lance with the Scott Weapons Company. And I think it affected 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines as much as it affected 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines. Because, as you just stated right there, no one wants to get clipped, 3 to 5 days after the hell you've gone through. And of course, the Marines with 2-6, they're brothers. It's like, very close. The horror of that thought that Lance Corporal Scott just had that happen. The 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines coming in thinking, right to the last day, we could be going down.
And they're getting hit on their first day on their RIP.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. So,
we had that happen in Marshall.
That'll echo. And General Kyle Ellison, these war fighters that we have today are just unbelievable, Ryan. Leaders in the United States Marine Corps, and it takes my, it hurts a little bit to watch our forefathers that we respect so much. God, we respect our forefathers. They've done amazing things. But our current general officer community, and I know Stu Scheller's looking for accountability and such, but I feel he needs to point that rifle on the right target, but we can talk a little bit more about that. But these current war fighters in the Marine Corps, Lieutenant General George Smith out there in 1MEF, and Bill Journey, and I can go on, Kyle Ellison's and the Mark Klingens out there, all these general officers. Oh my God, are they war fighters, Ryan? It's our generational guys that are going to write books about that are equal to the forefathers, and they're just unbelievable warfighters and leaders. That watching Secretary Mattis, I always said the first time I ever met Secretary Mattis, it was an accidental contact in a shower trailer in Fallujah, Iraq. A Marine recognized and asked him a question. That question turned into a 2-hour PME with him in a towel. And I'll tell you, no one, I don't know if that's a vision that anybody really wants to have. A brilliant man, but I don't know if that Secretary Mattis in a shower trailer in Fallujah. That's how committed our leaders were. That's how committed they are. One Marine recognized him and asked a question. That man stopped for 2 hours in a towel and gave a PME on what the question was, and he answered. Just unbelievable warfighters and leaders and leaders of men.
Yeah, agreed. And so I want to get into multiple things, and I don't want to cut you off anymore. Can we talk about the setup contextually, because there is a lot of divisive comments coming out. You have a lot of lionized generals and they and former staff, and it's like, and I get what they're saying, and are they just not doing the research to know why? And is there any way we can kind of fill the context in on why this force design was? I know we talked offline about Azerbaijan and Armenia and some of those conflicts that are basing these decisions. Can we get into that?
Yeah, Ryan, you and I talked just before we began the podcast. The first time I realized things were changing dramatically in a near-peer fighter, at least someone who had the ability to fight back, was the summer war in 2005, 2006, southern Lebanon, when anti-tank guided missiles were proliferated with Hezbollah, and it brought the Israeli army to a screaming halt. All those armor penetrations they were able to do relentlessly and without much friction, and drive into southern Lebanon, dominate the battle space, came to an end. Mm-hmm. And those anti-tank guided missiles, I watched that from Iraq, and I'm like, yeah, things have changed on the battlefield. And because we can proliferate TOW missiles and Javelin missiles, and God knows from every other country out there, these capabilities, we watched it unfold in 2005 and 2006. Things changed, and then we move forward to, I want to jump over a lot of other things, but then the fight for Mosul, 2016 timeframe, 17, our small units, our MARSOC operators, our special operators embedded with the Iraqis in the fight for Mosul. This is the first time we saw huge UAS battling, loitering munitions, UASs. These aren't new capabilities. They've been on the battlefield for a decade, and they're battle tested. So the fight for Mosul really began to codify the importance to me, UASs and loitering munitions. Sure. And then fast forward to the Nagorno-Karabakh war, and that Azerbaijan-Armenian example, that truly took two relatively near-peer, mid-peer opponents that were somewhat equal, an asymmetric advantage that technology gave the Azerbaijanis. And it's supplied by Turkey, and Turkey to this day, you see Ukraine using the TD2 and other technology. Turkey really took off with that. Mm-hmm. And so if people weren't paying attention back in 2005, 2006, I know the Marine Corps did, because before Force Design 2030, General Neller went on a path of learning with Force 2025. And he did Sea Dragon warfighting with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines experimentation, because he knew then what we know now, but it was before the National Defense Strategy was written in 2016 and released. So he was shooting at a dartboard like, I know what's out there. I know what we have to do to survive and succeed and win. So General Neller really began this. And Force 2025 was a rapid change coming out of Afghanistan. We saw guidons being put away and new guidons being stood up. Mm-hmm. So in reality, General Berger was the deputy commandant he was out there in the Pacific as a commander, senior commander, first 1MEF, and then PACOM out there, and R4 PAC, some other areas. So he came from the Pacific to help General Neller as the deputy commandant for combat development integration, do the concepts, to get the equipment, to figure out Force 2025. And so really what General Berger did is just take what General Neller had or was trying to do. But what now General Berger had to work with when he became commandant was the National Defense Strategy provided to him by Secretary Mattis. Mm-hmm. So now he could look at what he needed to provide the Department of Defense based on guidance provided to him by the Secretary, and then began the learning path that was already built. Now it's just refining learning more, this passive iterative understanding, experimentation, and get there. But it began way before General Berger. And so he just had some things that General Neller didn't have at the time. And I'll say the biggest thing was the national defense strategy provided by Secretary Mattis.
Yeah, he needed the blueprint.
He needed the blueprint.
That's right. That's right. And so this is just a continuation of Neller with the blueprint.
Yes.
From Mattis.
Yeah. And the beauty of this, and this is which resonates between you and I, because it's so important. The national defense strategy pointed to near peer and then prioritized who we were competitors with. And now the new national defense strategy by Secretary Austin has just raised the bar towards China being the number one priority for the Department of Defense. So like I always tell everyone, Marines have a horrible habit of doing what they're told. Right? So the Commandant's been told, China is your number one priority. Figure out that problem. So as a good Marine, they have the horrible habit of doing what they're told. We're going to figure that problem out.
Yeah.
But when Secretary Mattis created the National Defense Strategy, he also pressed Undersecretaries at CAPE, the Cost Assessment Program Evaluation Group, which is its funding section, to do a strategic portfolio review and examination of the close combat forces. Because he knew, hey, I know I need hypersonics and long-range fires, and I need these things that are going to defeat near-peer artificial intelligence. But by forcing the services to look up, the most fragile units in the DoD remain to be the infantry. So I need to make sure that they're going to be taken care of, because I've just told the services you need to go to near-peer competition. But on that same note, I have to worry about everything else as well. There's one for sure thing we do right, Ryan, is we pick the next war 100% wrong. Yeah. We never get the war we want, but we get the war we're given. So Secretary Mattis, through the Close Combat Strategic Portfolio Review, identified 5 major gaps in the close combat forces, and then stood up the Close Combat Lethality Task Force to close those gaps. And the reason why I bring this in with force design is because the efforts are closely aligned. I mean, there is almost no light between the two efforts, with force design and pushing capabilities out to the tactical edge, and what Secretary Mattis assigned the Close Combat Lethality Task Force to do, and what their mission was. So the driving document for the CCLTF is CAPE's Strategic Portfolio Review of the Close Combat Forces, a strategic document that says, going into the future, this is what must happen to make sure our close combat forces are prepared to fight in the environment we expect.
And that all of that information and all of those adaptations thrust us into why the commando course is what it is. And can we talk about that?
Yep. I just left the School of Infantry West last week. I was out there as we talk about the integration. I was out there at Project Convergence 2022, the Undersec, the DSD, Deputy Secretary of Defense, Ms. Kat Hicks went out there to see it. All the Army, a lot of Army senior leadership was out there as well as the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Commandant of the Marine Corps. Because what warmed my heart about this is PC-22 has been in the middle of the country. It's been heavily Army Air Force involved. This is the first vignette, as far as I'm aware of, outside of some simulations and modeling, that was on the West Coast at Camp Pendleton, California, and it was faced out over the Pacific. So there were all of our joint partners at Camp Pendleton, California, looking out over the Pacific with our strong Army partners that can bring to bear amazing capabilities. The Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps all coming together under this experimentation to look at the problem that the NTS has directed them to look at. God, it was heartwarming, Ryan. And right now, Fight Tonight capability, I'm confident from what I saw that we can start, right? We've got a lot of work to do, but as of time now, those folks as a joint force, a lot of work still to do. Got a lot of work, but they are working hard to ensure that we are interoperable, that we are a joint fighting force. And so when I left out of there from PC-22 to go up to the mountains of School Infantry West up north, I was just so excited to see that happening. The commando course, the Infantry Marines course, directed, by the Commandant of the Marine Corps to say, hey, take my force design, my commander's intent, and build a course. And both IMC, SY East, and SY West went to work. Now, it all comes back to people, Ryan. People make things, and I will submit to you that the good folks out at SY West it was the right place, right time, right people to come up with this concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm gonna point to those, the Gunny Burkharts and the Captain McConnells and the Lieutenant Colonel Harmons. But of course, Gunner A.J. Paschuty's played a key role in this. And I say the reason for this is because through the lens he looks at as a gunner, he was a Force Reconnaissance Marine, was a reconnaissance training company, staff NCOIC, became a gunner. So when he looks at what entry-level Marines can do from the basic reconnaissance course, reconnaissance training company, he asked the question with IMC, we're building independent small units. We're being asked to get smaller, push capability out to tactical edge. What's stopping the infantry? So they went through an iterative process of understanding, looking through the lens that Gunner Paschuty and these open-minded Gunny Burkharts and Captain McConnells and those who all come before them, and really came up with what I think, Ryan, is about a 70 to 80% solution. Is it perfect yet? Now it needs legs, it needs time, right? And as you get more time and experience and exposure, you're going to know where to fix the little things. But as far as where they are today, it's just unbelievable what they've been able to accomplish.
I've read some of your articles, and the one, A View from the Trenches, was eye-opening. And I'll let you speak on that a little bit. But if you can just tell me, I mean, you don't have to get too deep into it if you're not able to or don't want to, but what's different? Like, okay, so SOI or infantry Marines used to do this, and now when this goes through, what do? What's different?
I will tell you, Ryan, big updates, right? And they produce these wonderful things. It's not a whim. This has been well thought out. They have battle books. So, for instance, the ITB West has created, what was called the Blue Book. And the Blue Book, that name has a historic relevance to what NCOs used to carry around to enforce rules and policies and things of that nature. The things they come up with is one, an infantry Marine creed, right? We talk about the rifle creed, the Marine SAM. These things mean something. When I went through Ranger School, before I could do anything that meant something good for me, I had to stand up and scream the Ranger creed verbatim at the top of my heart. When I went through sniper school, I had to, at the top of my lungs, talk about the mission of a Marine Scout Sniper, those definitions verbatim. When you go through reconnaissance training company, the basic reconnaissance Marine had to go through and scream a reconnaissance Marine creed. Well, they said, this is a culture. The Marine Corps has to have a strong infantry culture. So they created the Infantry Marines Creed, number one. So they have a creed, which you and I, as you know, we didn't have a creed when we went through SOI. They have standing orders like Rogers Rangers, like the Rogers Rangers, rules. So they have now the standing orders, but they're updated to technology. These aren't looking back to the 1700s.
Right.
They updated things. Like, for instance, your training is unique. So never post pictures of your training in the field or discuss it online. The enemy is constantly looking to learn about your skills. He will learn your skills from what you post, right? These are now tactical, cultural things that warfighters need to worry about every day. They talk about having cell phones in the field. This is the standing orders of rules, denying the GPS and learning a map, right? So they talk about all these technology index. So the new standing orders, the Rogers Rangers of 1770s, the 1780s, now the Marine Corps has updated these things and said, hey, you just came from civilian to Marine. Welcome to the infantry, but now here's your life. You can't do things you used to do on social media. You certainly can. There's no restriction, but in this culture, you need to be warned what that means. What are your effects? So the standing orders, and we'll get into a little bit more of the training, but you can see how we're starting already to begin to change the mentality, the culture. One, Marines Creed, standing orders that are relevant, not something from based off the 1780s, but built off those shoulders of experience into what the technology and the problems we have today about being jammed or spoofed or RF'd and found due to signature. They don't talk about the signature reduction. They talk about the 5 Marine traits. The school now talks about the 4 elements, the 4 pillars of being an infantry Marine, and it starts with being amphibious, right? So they spend, when you and I finished recruit training, when we went to the School of Infantry, we didn't go back to a pool.
No.
On the West Coast now, not only do they go back to a pool, but they have open ocean swims.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine the infantry Marine, how, the confidence when you do these things and you find yourself in these environments. One, they have to put them in the pool because still to this day, and there's an argument whether these facts are true or whether these numbers are false, that 20% of recruits coming out of recruit training, 20% still can't swim. So when they go to the School of Infantry and you're an infantry Marine and the focus is on amphibious skills because of the problem set of the future,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
where you're going to be in the water, you're going to be around the water. That's the future. You and I, we fought in deserts, right? The where we are telling the Marines of the future to fight, it's going to be all water.
Yeah.
So they talk about, you know, the 5 traits, the focus on that. And one of the final focuses is critical thinking. They're not trying to make them platoon commanders or platoon sergeants or squad leaders. What they're trying to make them do is observational based decision. You obviously see that going left is a problem and going right helps support the team, then why in the hell are you going left? So a lot of this stuff at entry level, they're accepting more mistakes at the individual level. Because when you and I went through, it's almost like a Forrest Gump, shut up, get down,
Yeah.
look outboard. And you're like, okay, I just did 8 weeks of shut up, get down, or shut up and dig. And you're like, or I'll tell you when to stop. Just dig, right? And now there's a lot more critical thinking involved. They're forcing them, and it's at the basic level. So going from a recruit where you weren't allowed to think until probably 4th grade to even ask a question.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to build a Marine, instant willing obedience to all orders, respect for authority, self-reliance, and teamwork. Those things that are being ingrained at entry level. What they're not doing in that process is making you a critical thinker. Well, now we have to make them critical thinkers.
Yeah.
So, and it's about right and not right. So even in the blue book, it talks about, the life you've chose, right? The standards, the Marine Corps values, the value of being an infantryman, much different than what you and I went through. And that's at a basic level and where it starts. Now the standard, I can't even begin to tell you, they have 2 new things, the infantry physical assessment, IPA, and the infantry marksmanship assessment, 2 standards for the infantry. If another commander out there wants to put his Marines through it, there's never a restriction, but now your infantry Marines have to go through this. There's no 3rd class PFT rifle marksman, and you're still can be an infantryman. Those days are gone. So there's higher GT scores, higher physical fitness requirements, higher marksmanship requirements. You have to be a critical thinker, which isn't you don't just do what you're told. You have to look, and when you're told to shut up and get down, where is the best place to get down? Right?
It might not just be drop. Yeah.
I'm sure you give them privates at the time. You're like, you begin to rush. You stop them in the middle of a rush, and you're like, take a look at yourselves. And they're in the wide open when cover is no more than 3 feet away.
Yep.
They weren't doing basic critical thinking of where they were going to rush to. Take that moment and think. So they're doing much better now doing that. But I think the biggest change, Ryan, is the focus on the instructor. And I can't say this enough, just like you were a squad leader. What makes great squads? Squad leaders, platoon sergeants, platoon commanders. That's what makes great squads. The individual has to know their job and be bought into that. But who makes them? The combat instructor at SOI makes the new infantry Marine. And they now have a moral contract with a student. And now they're broke down in squads. So one individual combat instructor will have his or her squad, and they'll go all the way through the training together. And now not only does that build that moral bond, that but also now I'm building pyramids, right? Sergeants are all at the same rank, but not all of them are the same Marine.
For sure.
So if that squad's not performing well, but this squad's rocking it because this squad leader's been staying up late with his team, living with his Marines, teaching his Marines. This Marine, obviously on the pyramid, you build your own pyramid, right? All about you. In the past, combat instructors would walk from point A to point B. If you were a podium instructor, a lot of times your volume at the podium, he is the one that was able to scream the loudest. So he's probably the better combat instructor.
No, I like that. I think that's amazing. And it would. Competition breeds results too, and it's going to do that for the NCOs that are leading them too. I think some of the smartest Marines I served with, like on my level, intellectually and tactically, were I ran into at the School of Infantry as instructors. Like, those guys are good, and if they're in. And that gives a little bit of the pride too. So if I'm competing with my peers, that's going to force them to compete with each other and just moves everybody up. That's one thing I like about I've mentioned on the show before, not to kind of divert too much, but about small elements. Small elements are amazing because of that. And anyway, we can get back to it. We'll come back to small elements after this.
Yeah, but right there. So right at entry level, that bridge to the op core. I think the only thing missing at this point to update, and it just makes things easier. We grew up with IA drills, immediate action drills, and a lot of that becomes unit dependent because it's not really clearly defined what that is in doctrine. I think at one point or another, the Marine Corps has to really consider developing battle drills or just inheriting, take the Ranger handbook and take the battle drills already designed, 6 Alpha, clear room, for an example, take them and just use them as the basics. Because as Marines, the battle drill isn't the most important thing to me, but it's a start point. And it's a great thing you can civilian or recruit to an infantry Marine and explain to them why the battle drill exists. You got to be able to dominate the room, cut the corners. You have to be able to do these things, maintain fields of fire, cover, danger areas. But the most important thing is after you train that at entry level, and then the squad leader in the fleet now knows what the next step. And I think the next step is initiative-based tactics. And that came from Marines, from 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, and the assault into the Fallujah back in the 2004 timeframe. They built initiative-based tactics. So there's 4 elements to initiative-based tactics. And that truly is whether you're a good cohesive team, because a lot of it is applied communication, or whether you have not had the reps and sets and you haven't grown together as a team. So the battle drill is just the start. People are like, oh my God, Gunner, you said battle drills. You're stopping me from being creative. No, I'm stopping you from ruining an expeditionary force that has to have common operational pictures, common operational understandings. Because when I enter a room, based on the amount of clearing we may have to do, I may not have my 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fire teams. I may have my 1st fire team, but 2nd and 3rd fire team came from another squad or another platoon or another company because of the casualties we've incurred. So I'm offering that the battle drills give us the required common operational understanding, but it's the initiative-based tactics that the squad leaders out in the fleet need to own. They need to understand those 4 elements, run the battle drill, and watch initiative-based tactics unfold in that team. And that tells me whether or not they're a cohesive, well-trained unit.
Boom. Well, if you're a squad leader out there, just kind of put that in your pocket and make sure you're doing that right now. You don't want to get found out. Now, isn't there shooting packages that are involved in this commando course that are much better? I'm hearing much better than what they had before at SOI.
Yeah, Ryan, we're going to go back to my career a little bit here. I was the director of combat marksmanship programs in 2007, started in 2017. What makes this weird is I was the first born and bred gunner as the director of combat marksmanship programs when we merged the programs from range officers and gunners. Range officers in a way because they didn't deploy, and again, they were good folks, but they focused heavily on NRA competition style marksmanship, and the Marine Corps is famous for competition. And we would like to think it bled over to combat, but I think everyone came back from combat and said the same thing. We're horrible at combat marksmanship. Horrible. Table 1 didn't transcend over to the battlefield. These things, these fundamentals that you were teaching me were too slow when we were moving this fast. But we had to change. So we created under MAR Admin 11216 and Table 2 Alpha, the permission by, at the time, Gunner Vince Pope, who was initially a range officer. During the merger, he put the bomb on, and because he's a brilliant guy, we kept him out there. He did a tour with an infantry battalion, but then became the director of combat marksmanship. Built Table 2 Alpha. He also knew that we needed a better bridge to combat marksmanship. So when I took that job, I said, that's not a big enough step. We're half stepping into change. So we completely retooled annual rifle qual. And you see a lot of that being written about how annual rifle quals change. Table 1 at entry level, there isn't any better way to transition somebody from civilian to Marine and teach them about a rifle and basic fundamentals. But there is where it needs to stop. Because now I think that you can do in a simulator. That trigger control and those basic fundamentals we teach, those are all wonderful, but not anything I can't do in a simulator. We have to build off the shoulders of that. So we create annual rifle qual. And of course, as a gunner, it was focused on combat after we did a capability-based assessment in rifle lethality. We looked at the optics we're now fielding. We're no longer using iron sights. We use a 1x8 squad common optic. Before that, it was the RCO, but the rifle qual never changed. Even though we were given better capability, we were given free floated rails and M27s now pure fleeted and better optics. but now it's still just hit black. So you had experts. Everyone was an expert. Heck, when I give you a 1x8 powered scope and I'm asking you to hit targets between 300 meters, primarily a few at 500, you're going to be an expert.
And they're not moving. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
and they're not moving. So we changed it. And so now it's suppress, neutralize, and destroy. If you miss the target, you don't get points anymore. You don't get rings of, well, it's good that you shot at it, you missed, but you didn't miss that bad.
Mm-hmm.
So why not? I'm still going to give you points, So the majority of the course of fire is now, when you miss, there are no points. You've got scopes, you've got things. And if you miss the destroy, suppress, neutralize, or destroy, you miss the, shot placement's been the key to 5.56. So if you don't place your shots correctly into those kill zones, you also get a reduction of points, even though you may have hit them. In the days of iron sights, all you had to do is hit the silhouette.
Yep.
Hit it, you got your points, we moved on. Now you have to do shot placement, but it's because we have better rifles, we have better options.
Mm-hmm.
So training had to change, and it's a higher standard. If I tried to do this with iron sights at 500 meters, this would almost at 300 and 500 meters, nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Be really, really, really good. Now we're training Marines to use their gear, place shots appropriately, and create better lethality with 5.56 rounds. So the infantry Marine marksmanship, the infantry marksmanship assessment was built off from modules that came from there, and it gets into the training.
Yeah.
During that time, we looked at advanced training. Advanced is just more speed and accuracy. What's advanced marksmanship? You're faster and more accurate. That's advanced. So we created, and I boldly stole this title, General Mental Skills Training, from Dr. Karen Kelly. She was doing experimentation over resilience with basic reconnaissance. This transcended over to marksmanship because we owned the class called Combat Mindset, and it only covered the Cooper's Color Code.
Yep.
I'm like, man, we're getting into human performance. We know so much more about the person. We got to get beyond this. We got to go further. We have to take Combat Mindset and create resilience using the vehicle and marksmanship. We have to create the ability to perform under stress, to recover. So we ran this course. A special operator came in and told us, in 15 days, I can do what you can't do in 4 years. So of course, when it's like, all right, show us.
Yeah, hustle your evidence.
Yeah, so in 15 days, this course was brutal, though, Ryan. I'll tell you, it's tough, it's hard, but it's what Marines joined the Marine Corps to do. 15 days, no sleep, a lot of accountability, a lot of force on force, individual dueling and fighting all night long. But in 15 days, he created a savage. And we all stood back as Marines and went, whoa. I mean, we were having improvements in some areas at 500% marksmanship performance improvements against opposition based. So against an aggressor, you had to fight them moving and doing what you needed to do to win the gunfight. There were improvements over 500%. We sent it to BCCDI, General Berger at the time, and General Neller saw it. And they're like, more of it, but I need two things. One, are you hurting them? Because, it's a brutal course. And number two, are you creating PTSD in the student by how stressful it is? So we had a psychologist, psychiatrists, physiologists, everyone come back after phase 2 of the training, and all those were thrown out. We weren't creating PTSD in a student. We weren't hurting them. All wounds were superficial, healed in 3 to 4 days. But the outcome was amazing. But what was better is, as you know, Ryan, when you go through tough, hard training and you come back, that means something to you in the trenches.
Oh, yeah.
You look at your peers and go, I dare you to do that. I dare you to go do that, become gunfighter qualified at that course. I dare you. And that's
now, how do you go to that course, or is that now built in?
They took the modules from that training, the marksmanship stuff, and that's what transferred over to what's built around the IMA, or the Advanced Marksmanship Training Program. We're still studying the human performance side. That hasn't been into it. When General Alford saw it when he was the CG of Training Command, he jumped right on it. Can I do this now? Can I put this in infantry training this second?
Sure.
It was amazing. The answer was no. We still have work to do on it, but we need some dedicated focus on it. But man, Ryan, those Marines that come out of it, they're savages.
Nasty, huh? Well, that'd be great. And so, but do we have, with the new commando course as it sits now, does it have these updated marksmanship quals in it, or is it just updated marksmanship training?
As of now, it has these new standards.
Okay.
And there's a lot more shooting and moving, a lot more moving targets, a lot more what combat is.
Yeah.
Not only are you moving because you have to stay alive, but the enemy's moving because they're trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more of that, and it's only going to get better. We have a new simulator out there that we're looking at. I don't know what the Marine Corps is going to choose. I'm not an acquisitions person, so I can speak to capabilities out there. Bircher does a good job. Conflict Kinetics with Gunfighter Jim does a great job. So there's simulators out there today that the Marine Corps Operational Test and Evaluation Activity, MICATIA, did a study, and these new simulators today, the outcome is after 2 weeks of training in the simulator or doing equivalent live fire training, the Marines in the simulator perform better at a final validation live fire event than those did on the live fire ranges.
Yeah, I've actually used the conflict kinetic system multiple times. I have some buddies that are, in the company and run the company and have the things, and we just had a system out at our VFW for an anniversary party, and we set up like a team trainer to just show, the company did, not we, but the company did. And I've used that, and like, if I could have that and regular infantry squads could come there whenever they wanted, not whenever they wanted, but they could square that training away, go to the gunfighter gym, run their squad through weaponized PT, and then run them through cognitive processing and A's, ones, and pluses. And then I can watch their lethality. Me as a squad leader, I can see who's faster and who's more accurate as a shooter. I can map my whole squad better that way. Like, that is something that is needed, and I'm excited about it. Like, that's something I'm excited about and passionate about, because if you have that as a squad level or at the platoon level, you can really build teams differently and more lethally.
Ryan, when it came to the gunfighter gym, one, they have these simulators now have patents in human performance, like you talked about. I can map the human performance. I can do neural overrides and make it faster. I can do things in human performance that we've defined. Now you can do them in simulators and really get your guys and girls moving, get your Marines moving. But what also makes it interesting, the 75th Ranger Regiment, they had one, and they put a QR code up on the bulkheads of the barracks. So the squad leader could just go by with his phone, scan the QR code, and a schedule would pop up.
Boom.
He could schedule his own squad to go to that simulator at his time and just inform his chain command, hey, my squad's going over to gunfighter. All because it was all placement in the barracks, QR code, schedule it yourself, get in there and run small unit training. These simulators now are there. I'm excited about being in there, because you can, as being a squad leader, you can imagine you just walk out, QR code, put your schedule in, tell your platoon commander when you're bringing your squad, and just get after it.
That's where it's at. That is where it's at. And you think that's where we're heading? Is one of these systems going to be procured for standardized training?
Right now, they call it the Advanced Small Arms Lethality Trainer ASALT program. Mark will be doing their down select. I don't know. I'm not involved in that. I just know timelines and POA&M. When we expect to see whatever it is that they down select to our acquisitions folks. And when we begin IBX 2.0, the Infantry Battalion Exercise 2.0 for the Marine Lab, you can certainly be guaranteed that whatever the service provides in that simulated capability will be used and studied. Are we making more proficient, more resilient, more capable Marines by using these simulators? And I think hypothetically, that question will be asked. And of course, due to the experience I have, I'll tell you, I think the answer is going to be yes.
It's crazy what all is going virtual. And I think there's something to be said about virtual reality. However, until we can get it small enough, like it's a pair of goggles or glasses, then it's not going to make sense, because you're not going to be able to mount a weapon or stock weld. It's going to take a little bit of that away. I think there's definitely situations you could put people in, though, in virtual reality, with a headset, probably to get to a VO2 max, to scare them, to make them nervous, get them in these close combat situations. And you inundate somebody with that and they realize how to do that. I mean, it goes back to on combat and on killing, by Grossman. If you do the right training and you show them what it's going to be, then they will be able to slow themselves down and think about that better when they're actually in that situation, instead of just being all the way up because it's something they've never experienced before. And so I think virtual reality is going to be good for that. But some of these other, these team trainers, the CK stuff, I'm excited about all that, because that's stuff that as a squad leader, if I had that opportunity, that capability at that time, I'd have been all over that. Especially at Lejeune, where you can't just square ranges away like you can at some other places.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Ryan, right off the top, it's my warfighters asking me for it, and as a CWO5 gunner, if I'm not listening to my sergeants, how disconnected am I?
Mm.
So I have a bunch of Ryan Rogers out there going, Gunner, why the heck don't I have the advanced small arms lethality trainer, whatever that is? And they would choose it. They're bringing their Marines to it. They want it. You know, how many times did Ryan Rogers ask, can I go to the ISMIT?
Not
No.
not very many times.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But now our capabilities have gotten it to the point where our warfighters are asking for it. They've been in it. They're like, wait a minute, this isn't the ISMIT I saw at recruit training or did some work at the School of Infantry. And then I got to the fleet and I just don't see the relevance in it. I want this. Give me more of it.
Well, look, I have admiration for that, and the systems and the companies that are making them. I'm sure that we'll get to a point, something will get procured, and we'll get to a point where the Marines are training like that all the time, and that's second nature, and that's just going to make them more dangerous. It's going to make them more savage, quicker, and some of the weaponized PT training that I've seen in those systems is brutal. Like, you're going to get slayed in there, and then you're going to get thrown into a situation on time, and you're going to have to perform. And but doing that in the rear makes doing it in country easier, and that's the whole goal, right? We've been going for about an hour and 6 minutes. Is there anything else that I have failed to mention or failed to bring up that you find important? And I'm open to anything. We'll keep moving. But you've pretty much answered the questions that I had coming into this about force design and commando at this point.
Yeah, no, Ryan, I think the emphasis really is the investment in the individual. We know that the Marine Corps, there was just a study out, I just posted it on LinkedIn, that the Marine Corps still been rated as strong compared to our other services. And it's because General Berger hasn't lost sight of what makes the Marine Corps special. A lot of debates, as you see the debates going back and forth, and we're going to destroy the Marine Corps and its culture. Believe me, from what I've been exposed to, what I've been a part of, that culture is only getting stronger. There'll be certain parts. Do I need my cyber warrior to go through recruit training if they're coming from Google? I may never see that individual. As far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna throw a Marine Corps T-shirt on him and make sure that I have coverage. So when I maneuver across a multi-domain battlefield, he is providing the cover I need, who I may never ever see.
Yeah,
right? He's providing the coverage I need to move with those teams that are going to close with and kill the enemy. And for those folks that are closing with and killing the enemy, our culture is only getting stronger. The standards have gone up. The technology we're providing them is absolutely amazing. So as we continue to march towards the Commandant's intent, his vision to what we need to be, man, Ryan, I'll tell you, it's the stuff you wished you had in Marja, stuff I wished I had in Marja, and I cannot wait. One of the smartest things he ever said is, I want a machine between the enemy and any individual Marine. Make that happen. I don't want to send a Lance Corps be the first thing into a room, into the danger area. I no longer want to see that. And that's a moral commitment at the lowest level. But that's what the technology will do at the tactical edge, right? But what we are truly concentrating on, Ryan, I really like to make sure we emphasize as we go through this, is our focus on the individual. I mean, we are truly, with human performance and training, the true investment General Berger has told people to do and where we're going to go. You're going to start seeing the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion experiment with new enhanced squad leader courses and things of that nature. Stand by. It's a strong force, man. Excited about it. And
so a lot of my audience or a lot of my push is to the NCOs. The NCOs, in my mind, in my estimation, and my experience, are the backbone of the Marine Corps, the backbone of the infantry fighting down. If you could look into the camera and tell those NCOs something, what would you say to them?
That the NCO has even become more important. We see the maturity of rank being added in the future design. Staff sergeant, squad leaders, E7 platoon sergeants, because they're expected to operate under a commander's intent, operate independently, operate in a dispersed environment, and win. And so there's a lot more to being alone and unafraid. That's not what it is. It's how these young leaders are going to be able to coordinate with their left and right and higher, and ensure that they have the layers of mutual support and the capabilities within their mission that whoever they run into, and they're going to dominate it. So I would be so excited right now to be an NCO. And I think that's why we exceeded our retention goals this year, because of the focus on the NCO. The NCOs are feeling it. They know it. They can see it. They can taste it. And man, what an exciting time to be an NCO right now, to go from corporal to staff sergeant during this phase, seeing all this emphasis on me and my capability and my training and my education, and then giving me a little bit of the freedom to let me be the leader you're asking me to be. Just an exciting time, right?
Yep, amazing. And for the warriors in the ranks that say, like me before, well, once you get to platoon sergeant, you're moving away from the action. You got your chance to stay right in it now for a while longer in the regular infantry. So that's cool. That's like kind of, I see the romantic side of that for the warrior side. Gunner LaRose, I appreciate you. I'm honored to have you on the show. I appreciate you coming on and kind of from the horse's mouth, the person that's on the task force traveling around, gauging lethality, publishing articles for me to guys like me to read so we can kind of stay in the loop. But I appreciate what you do. I appreciate what you've done for this country, and you're patriot. And it was guys like you that I looked up to for my career going through to try to, emulate throughout my life. And I don't imagine that's going to stop when the uniform comes off. So it didn't for me. So I appreciate you being here. Maybe we can get linked back up in the future as things begin to develop and such. But I really appreciate having you on and having the words of wisdom out there.
Yeah, no, Ryan, the privilege is all mine. I like to remind folks that out there, watching your podcast or reading your book, when you meet Ryan Rogers, when America, when it's time to close with the enemy and someone screams go, there's the Ryan Rogers that are closing with the enemy. That last 100 meters, enter the compound, clear it, hold that ground, called sovereign American territory while you continue to move forward. So it's a privilege and honor for me to be here with you because of what you're doing and that model that you've passed on, and those Marines are doing it today. When we say go, it's Ryan Rogers that did that.
Well, I appreciate those words, sir. That's kind of you. And I appreciate your time. Guys, that's all we got for today. We're going to let it go there. I'm sure Gunner LaRose has things he'd rather do on a Sunday to get after it. But I hope you enjoyed the episode. And like I said, follow, like, share, subscribe, and push this information out, guys. Let's merge together and come together on this topic, and then full steam ahead. If we're together, nobody can stop us. Choices, not chances. Thanks, guys. All right, guys. Gunner LaRose is off the hook. What an interview that was. I'd looking forward to getting that interview for a minute. And to be honest with you, it all stemmed from, some LinkedIn communications and some articles that he had published. And I felt like that we could bring that, bring the two sides a little closer together through the interview process. So I hope that worked. Matt, what did you take away from the interview, man?
Great episode, great interview. Of course, Gunners have always been near and dear to my heart just because my uncle. A lot of Marines don't even know about Gunners, and that they're. I mean, I don't want to be too bad, but basically God in the Marine Corps is what they are, in my opinion. But dude, how Marine Corps is it to get drunk on spring break, and then join the Marine Corps after watching Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
That's classic.
Classic.
Classic. There are certain men that were made to do this job. That's how it happens.
And then, of course, he has to go on in his first enlistment and request leave to go to jail after beating the hell out of some people.
Again, classic gruntism.
And his first sergeant had his back, which was awesome. So.
And CO2. Yeah, that was a cool story. That was a heartthrob story for like regular infantry guys that that maybe can relate to that. And I know there's a lot of guys that can't relate to that maybe didn't get that same treatment in our age, but definitely cool to hear that at his from his time.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then I don't want to be the last Marine killed in Afghanistan during the pullout. That was it kind of got me there,
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things, man. I think I know you and I had talked offline about this kind of stuff before. Nobody wants to be last, but you damn sure don't want to make it like 6 3/4 months through a deployment and then get snipped. Like you did all of that shitty, fighting in hell to get clipped right at the end. No, and nobody maybe verbalized it with us, but it was definitely on the minds of people, especially going out, that last week, still having to go out and get after it, even when your relief is inbound. And I think guys think about it. I don't know that everybody thinks about it. I don't think I thought about it too much, but I heard it around the platoon a little bit, so I think guys can relate to that for sure. And then you talk about not just closing out a platoon or a platoon deployment or a company deployment, battalion deployment. Now you're closing out the entire war.
Right.
So I'm sure the gravity of that is, that adds a little something for sure. I thought.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I thought in the very beginning, just his catalyst almost to service was an awesome story, to watch his mom struggle and then make the right decisions to do what she had to do to make, better family environment, and then marries a Marine, having that Marine impact his life and, teach him and allow him to grow up. And then, ultimately when Beirut gets hit, he talks about how that affected his father, that some, 30 some years later, whatever it was, to the point where, only other time he ever seen him cry. And it's like, we talked offline about how HKIA and, the fall of Kabul kind of did that to a lot of our generation, just took the wind out of your chest. Like, what are we doing? Kind of thing. And, we're losing people on a massive scale that nobody's seen coming. It hurts. Like, you feel that still. And maybe that's the cultism of the Marine Corps, or maybe that's, I think it's more of the warrior class, of the, people that have been there and done that, and they understand the gravity of it. And I think it just hits a little bit different. So to have that and say, I want to have that, that's the love that I want to experience.
Right.
To me was an amazing, testament to, who he was and who he was to become.
To be there because they're there.
Right. Sounds familiar, huh?
That's it.
Didn't know who was going to be there, but I knew I was going to have some brothers.
That's right.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I thought. Yeah, go ahead.
Two last things. Not posting the training, not the videos, the pictures, and all that. It's something that we didn't really. I mean, social media was a thing, but it wasn't as big as it is today. And heck, cell phones have only made that a lot easier. We had cell phones when we were in, but I mean, you could barely even get on Facebook on them cell phones half the time, depending on your connection, on your data connection. So yeah, just a big point for the NCOs, the guys,
the OPSEC.
The OPSEC. But if your Marines see you doing it, they're gonna do it too. Something to remember.
For sure.
And then he brought up not denying the GPS and learning the map, and for me that struck a chord so heavy because we did so much land nav. And I mean, when we came in, they had GPSs, but they weren't used like we did on deployment, because we did end up using them quite a bit. But we always plotted our routes on our maps, carried them with us, and that was our backup. And if you can't plot an 8-digit grid with a protractor and figure out where you're at with a resection or some terrain association, you're probably not going to do too good in certain climbs and places. And you got to be able to,
especially like the Pacific climbing places,
right, or alpine forests or what have you. You
sure.
know, so not that we've operated in either of those, but we can imagine. And we've talked to enough people to know.
Yeah, but what did they say? The gunner said, "We never get the war we want."
That's right. That's right. So that's all I had. I mean, just great episode.
Yeah, man. Excited to get it out there. Excited for you guys to hopefully this served as, a way that we can bring the two sides together. At the same time as we respect and we honor our forefathers, there is research that has went into this and new weapons on the field that make this the way. And we need to come together and make this the way, together. I appreciate you guys for coming out. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, hit the little bell if you're watching on YouTube, so you know when all new content comes out. And I hope you took something away from this episode, guys. Till next time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger. We have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunshop.com.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good.
That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.